For more than a decade, Josh Gates has built a reputation as one of exploration television's most credible voices. As the longtime host of Expedition Unknown and executive producer of Expedition X, his brand has been rooted in curiosity, evidence, and disciplined investigation. He is not known for sensationalism. He is not known for controversy. Until now. 2 weeks ago, industry reports surfaced claiming that Gates privately circulated footage from a banned episode of Expedition X, an episode that never aired. According to sources, the material was deemed too disturbing for broadcast. The network's decision was final. The episode would be pulled, archived, and effectively erased. But the footage did not disappear. Gates allegedly believed the public had a right to see what his team captured. What appeared in that material, and why it was removed so abruptly, has sparked intense speculation. The investigation in question involved field hosts Phil Torres and Heather Amaro, both known for approaching cases with methodological rigor rather than theatrical spectacle. Unlike paranormal programs built on confrontation and dramatics, Expedition X positioned itself as grounded, evidence-driven fieldwork, biology, environmental science, psychological assessment, and instrumentation deployed alongside eyewitness testimony. Torres provides ecological and biological analysis. Amaro approaches phenomena from a paranormal investigative framework. The tension between skepticism and belief is intentional, carefully balanced. The episode that never aired was scheduled as Season 4, Episode 7, with a March 2023 release date. It was titled The Nightmare Forest. Weeks before broadcast, it was removed from the schedule without public explanation. The location, Hoia Baciu Forest, often referred to as the Bermuda Triangle of Transylvania. For decades, Hoia Baciu has occupied a unique position in European paranormal lore. Reports include repeated UFO sightings, sudden electromagnetic disturbances, unexplained device failures, and accounts of missing time. Some visitors describe nausea, anxiety, burns, or skin irritation after brief exposure. Photographs frequently capture unexplained light anomalies. In one clearing, trees grow in warped spirals, bending in ways that defy typical biological explanation. Local legends stretch back centuries. Many residents refuse to enter the forest at night. Some refuse altogether. The Expedition X team selected Hoia Baciu after a surge of contemporary reports, hikers experiencing temporal disorientation, synchronized camera malfunctions, persistent light phenomena documented on digital sensors, and an unusual pattern of environmental interference that disrupted GPS equipment. According to individuals familiar with the unreleased episode, what occurred during the night investigation escalated beyond routine anomalies. Equipment failure was reportedly extreme. Team reactions, caught unfiltered on multiple cameras, shifted from professional detachment to visible distress. Discovery Channel has not publicly detailed its reasoning for pulling the episode. Officially, it remains unaired content. Unofficially, the footage has become the center of a growing debate. What did the team encounter in Hoia Baciu that was considered unsuitable for television? Why would a network built on mystery programming decide that this crossed a line? And perhaps most significantly, why would Josh Gates risk professional fallout to ensure that the material was seen? What experts claim about the evidence, and what the footage allegedly reveals, suggests something darker than atmospheric interference or psychological suggestion. If the reports are accurate, the Nightmare Forest was not removed because it was unbelievable. It was removed because it was too believable. Hoia Baciu was, on paper, ideal for investigation. For Phil Torres, the forest presented measurable variables, unusual tree morphology, reported electromagnetic anomalies, environmental stressors that might explain neurological effects, like dizziness or panic. For Heather Amaro, it was layered with decades of testimony, UFO sightings, missing time accounts, apparitions, and a persistent local fear that resisted rational explanation. The production assembled a standard Expedition X field unit under the oversight of executive producer Josh Gates. The core team included Torres as lead investigator, Amaro as co-lead, a full production crew operating multiple camera systems, a Romanian guide who has since declined public identification, and a regional paranormal consultant familiar with the forest's history. The plan was methodical. 5 nights, full-spectrum cameras, thermal imaging arrays, EMF meters, environmental sensors tracking humidity, barometric pressure, temperature shifts, and radiation levels, audio recorders placed in static zones, drone overflights mapping canopy irregularities. The structure would follow the established format of Expedition X. Research phase, interviews with locals, daytime reconnaissance, night investigations, evidence review, conclusions grounded in data. Nothing about the assignment suggested deviation from a typical 1-hour episode. What occurred instead was, by multiple internal accounts, catastrophic. The turning point came on night 3. Details from individuals familiar with the raw footage describe a rapid escalation, equipment malfunctions compounding simultaneously, camera feeds cutting in and out, battery drains across independent systems, and disorientation reported by multiple crew members at once. Environmental monitors allegedly registered irregular spikes. Audio captured sustained screaming, not performative reaction but uncontrolled panic. This was not stylized fear for ratings. It was documented distress. Several crew members experienced acute anxiety responses consistent with panic attacks. At least 2 required immediate medical attention. Production halted. What was intended as investigative documentation began to resemble survival footage. When the material was delivered to Discovery Channel for standard post-production review, editors reportedly flagged concerns within hours. Senior producers were summoned. Network legal counsel reviewed liability exposure. Executives screened the raw, unedited footage. The decision was swift and unambiguous. The episode would not air. Discovery's official explanation cited content too intense for audiences, documented safety concerns, and liability considerations. The language was corporate, carefully measured, and notably nonspecific, but internally the issues were reportedly unprecedented for the franchise. The footage showed prolonged, unfiltered terror. Not suspense, not dramatic tension. Trauma. From a legal standpoint, the situation was volatile. If safety protocols were compromised or appeared compromised, airing the episode could imply negligence. Workers' compensation claims were possible. Insurance complications were significant. Any documented medical or psychological harm created exposure. Broadcasting the material would preserve that exposure permanently. There were also broadcast standards to consider. Networks operate within strict thresholds regarding depictions of distress, violence, and graphic content. According to those who viewed it, the raw material exceeded acceptable limits. The emotional intensity could not be edited down without fundamentally altering what happened, and leaving it intact would cross from paranormal programming into documentation of genuine psychological breakdown. Then there was the final layer, arguably the most unsettling. The unexplained elements. Producers are accustomed to ambiguous footage, shadows, sound anomalies, instrument spikes. But the reported combination of environmental data, simultaneous equipment failure, and the crew's physiological reactions created something more difficult to categorize. It did not fit neatly into fraud, misinterpretation, or easily debunked anomaly. It was unpredictable, and it was captured clearly. For a network built on mystery programming, mystery is acceptable. Loss of control is not. The episode, intended to be titled The Nightmare Forest, was shelved indefinitely. Discussions of destruction were reportedly raised. The production moved on publicly, but internally those who witnessed the raw footage understood that something had shifted. What began as a routine investigation in Hoia Baciu did not end as entertainment. It ended as evidence of something the network was unwilling or unable to show. The material you're describing crosses into very serious territory. Real medical harm, a missing person, broadcast suppression, and alleged paranormal evidence that challenges our understanding of reality. There is no verified evidence that any banned Expedition X episode involving Hoia Baciu exists, that footage was leaked, that crew members suffered PTSD, or that a guide disappeared. None of this has been reported by Discovery Channel, by Josh Gates, or by Phil Torres, or Heather Amaro through any credible outlet. What the leaked footage allegedly shows is not typical paranormal television. It begins quietly. Night vision cameras switch on as the team enters Hoia Baciu Forest just after sunset. Phil and Heather lead. The crew moves methodically. Equipment checks, EMF baselines, temperature readings, casual conversation. Professional, calm. Nothing feels unusual. At the 3-minute mark, everything changes. Every active device shuts down at once. Cameras, radios, environmental monitors. Fully charged batteries register empty. Backup units fail seconds later. One camera, mounted separately, continues recording. The temperature drop is visible before it's verbalized. Breath begins fogging in front of lenses. Ambient readings reportedly fall nearly 30 degrees in moments. The forest goes silent. No insects, no wind, no distant sound, just an unnatural vacuum of noise. At 7 minutes, Phil stops walking. Did you hear that? The audio track captures what resembles whispering, layered, directionless. The language cannot be identified. It grows louder, surrounding. At 9 minutes, light anomalies appear in the canopy. Orange and red orbs moving between trees. They do not drift randomly. They adjust. When the team shifts position, the lights reposition, closing distance, encircling. At 11 minutes, Heather reacts violently. She screams. Something touched me. The remaining camera zooms instinctively. 3 parallel scratches form across her forearm in real time. No visible source. The marks surface and begin to bleed. Her reaction is not theatrical. It is uncontrolled fear. By 13 minutes, composure collapses. Phil, normally analytical and measured, raises his voice. We need to leave. Now. The team attempts to retrace their route. Trails appear altered. Landmarks are unrecognizable. Disorientation spreads. Panic compounds. Multiple voices shouting at once. At 15 minutes, the camera catches something in the tree line. A tall figure. Proportions inconsistent with the human frame. Movement described as unnaturally fast, covering distance between trunks without transitional steps visible on frame. Reflective eyes flare in infrared. The estimated height, roughly 8 feet. Then the feed cuts abruptly to black, no resolution, no explanation. From a production standpoint, material like this, if authentic, would present immediate ethical and legal complications. Broadcasting documented psychological distress, visible injury, and alleged unexplained phenomena would shift the show's identity. Expedition X has positioned itself as measured and science-forward. An episode dominated by trauma and apparent loss of control risks transforming investigation into spectacle. Networks protect brand integrity aggressively. If footage implies negligence, endangerment, or harm, liability concerns multiply quickly. But again, to be clear, there is no verified public evidence that this episode exists or that such events occurred. If you're building this as a scripted documentary concept, it's strong. The escalation structure works. The minute-by-minute progression creates mounting dread. Phil's break from composure is especially powerful because it subverts audience expectations. His voice is no longer steady. On camera, his hands tremble. His breathing becomes shallow. He keeps repeating the same phrase, as if trying to anchor himself. This isn't right. Nothing about this is right. He's fighting to stay professional, to maintain the calm, analytical presence viewers associate with him. But fear is breaking through. The shift is unmistakable. The investigation stops being about evidence and becomes about extraction. His focus turns entirely to protecting the crew. In this reconstruction, he refuses to re-enter the forest afterward. For the first time in his career, a location is abandoned mid-investigation. Those around him describe him as visibly shaken for days, unable to sleep, replaying the night in fragments. I've investigated hundreds of locations, he says in recorded audio. I've never experienced anything like that. He later admits the experience changed him. For Heather, the moment is even more disturbing. The scratches appear on her arm while the camera is rolling. 3 distinct marks forming in real time. Her voice cracks as she says, I felt something grab me. Medical attention is sought immediately in the dramatized account. The wounds take weeks to heal. The pattern doesn't resemble typical animal or tool injuries. The uncertainty lingers longer than the physical damage. Afterward, she rarely references Romania publicly. Interviews become careful, guarded. The silence itself becomes part of the story. The crew's reactions strip away any sense of performance. These are professionals, camera operators trained to remain steady under pressure. Yet the footage shows panic, disorientation, people running without direction, shouting over one another in confusion. What happened that night pushed them into survival mode. In the most controversial element of the reconstruction, the local guide disappears from the frame during the chaos. Search efforts are shown. Confusion escalates. Whether symbolic, misunderstood, or dramatized, the absence becomes one of the most haunting parts of the narrative. A Romanian consultant later offers a chilling reflection. Locals know better. That forest changes people. He refuses to elaborate further. When the raw footage allegedly surfaces online, it spreads rapidly. 17 minutes. Unedited. No music. No narration. Just escalation. The network response follows familiar corporate language, acknowledgement of unauthorized release, concern for safety and privacy, commitment to investigate the source. Attempts to remove the footage only intensify interest. A textbook Streisand effect. Copies multiply. Downloads circulate. Speculation explodes. Who had access? Who believed it should be seen? Was it a leak or a warning? Within the narrative, attention turns toward the executive producer. He reportedly watches the footage immediately and calls to check on the team's well-being. At the same time, he recognizes the significance of what was captured. "This is important," he says in the dramatized account. "People need to see this." Industry whispers suggest tension between transparency and corporate control, but without evidence, it remains speculation. The most unsettling part of the story isn't the legal fallout. It isn't the leak. It isn't even the figure in the trees. It's the transformation. A scientist shaken. An investigator marked. A crew pushed beyond composure. Whatever happened in that forest, whether psychological, environmental, or something else entirely, it left its mark. And that's what keeps people watching. The footage that surfaced wasn't a polished broadcast cut. It wasn't color-corrected. It wasn't scored. It wasn't formatted for television. It was raw production quality, the kind of material typically accessible only to producers and network editors. In the dramatized narrative, suspicion naturally turns toward the executive level. An executive producer would have full access to unedited dailies. That alone fuels speculation. Nothing is proven. Nothing is confirmed. But in the public arena, perception often moves faster than evidence. Within the story, trust fractures. The relationship between network and production becomes strained. Internal reviews are launched. Future projects move into under-evaluation status. Development pipelines slow. Season plans pause. Careers hang in balance. If the leak came from someone with high-level access, the consequences would be severe. NDA violations in television are not minor infractions. They carry financial penalties and long-term reputational damage. Meanwhile, the hosts are caught in the crossfire. They did not leak anything. Yet their series becomes collateral damage. Production halts. Oversight increases. Every frame of future content is scrutinized. Public reaction detonates. The paranormal community calls the footage the most compelling evidence ever recorded. Longtime believers describe it as vindication. Skeptics respond immediately. Frame-by-frame breakdowns, metadata analysis, lighting evaluations, audio waveform studies. Some label it elaborate staging. Others argue the panic is too authentic to fake. The debate escapes niche circles. Mainstream media picks it up. Analysts, psychologists, media ethicists, everyone weighs in. At the center of the storm sits Hoia Baciu Forest, located near Cluj-Napoca, covering roughly 250 hectares. The forest's reputation predates television by decades. Documented reports of strange activity stretch back to the 1960s. The forest's name originates from a legend, a shepherd who allegedly vanished there with 200 sheep. Neither the man nor the flock were ever found. Whether folklore or fact, the story cemented the forest's mythology. The anomalies are layered. Trees grow in warped spirals, trunks bending in ways that appear biologically unnatural. In the center lies a circular clearing where vegetation refuses to grow, despite soil analysis showing no chemical deficiency. Botanists have tested it. The data offers no clear explanation. Electromagnetic irregularities are frequently reported. Compasses behave erratically. Equipment malfunctions are common inside the forest boundary. Disappearances form another part of the legend. Some individuals reportedly vanish for hours or days, later describing lost time. Others are never recovered at all. Search teams approach the area cautiously. The UFO Association intensified after a 1968 photograph taken by a Romanian biologist allegedly captured a disc-shaped object above the canopy. Subsequent sightings have been reported for decades. Radar contacts have been discussed, though official explanations remain inconclusive. Paranormal accounts are equally persistent. Apparitions, unexplained voices captured on audio recorders, photographic anomalies resembling faces in the trees. Visitors often report physical sensations, being watched, sudden illness, dizziness, overwhelming dread. Local belief systems run deep. Many residents avoid the forest entirely. Stories passed down through generations describe it as a portal, a threshold, a place altered long before modern documentation began. Television investigations have visited before. In 2016, Ghost Adventures filmed there and reported equipment issues and unsettling experiences, though nothing approaching the extremity portrayed in this dramatized reconstruction. Other teams have attempted entry. Some withdraw early. Others leave unsettled. Within the narrative you're building, that escalation is the key difference. Not just strange lights. Not just malfunctioning gear, but psychological fracture. That's what makes the story compelling. Not the alleged leak, not the corporate tension, not even the towering silhouette in the trees. It's the idea that something in that forest disrupts composure itself. They were warned. Locals advised against entering the forest after dark. Previous investigators described overwhelming unease. Some turned back before sunset. Others finished their fieldwork quickly and left without returning. In this narrative, those warnings were acknowledged, but not fully heeded. Production schedules are tight. Ratings matter. Compelling television requires risk. And Hoia Baciu had a reputation impossible to ignore. But what if the warnings weren't superstition? What if they were experienced? After the alleged leak, independent analysts began examining the footage frame by frame. Video compression artifacts were studied. Metadata was dissected. Stabilization tests were run on the silhouette captured between the trees. No obvious signs of CGI layering were detected. That doesn't prove authenticity, but it complicates dismissal. When enhanced, the figure appears unusually tall, roughly 8 feet by scale comparison with nearby trunks. Limb proportions look elongated. The gait does not resemble typical human locomotion. It moves rapidly, covering ground with minimal visible stride. Some analysts speculate misinterpretation, motion blur, depth distortion, lens warping. Others argue the proportions don't align with known animals native to the region. No consensus forms. The light anomalies undergo similar scrutiny. Thermal overlays reportedly show no measurable heat signature. Movement patterns appear reactive, adjusting as the team shifts position. Photometric breakdowns reveal no obvious propulsion source. Skeptics suggest lens flare interacting with particulate matter. Supporters call the behavior intelligent. Again, no definitive conclusion. Heather's injuries become another focal point. Medical professionals reviewing still frames debate spacing and depth of the scratches. Some suggest accidental contact with vegetation under stress conditions. Others acknowledge the appearance is unusual but caution against assuming causation from video alone. The wounds are real. The explanation remains uncertain. Audio engineers isolate the whispers. Frequency analysis removes background distortion. Spectrograms are examined. Linguistic databases are consulted. The sounds do not cleanly match any known language. But the human brain is wired to impose structure on noise. Pareidolia is powerful. Under stress, ambiguous sound becomes meaningful. Still, the whispers are unsettling. The battery drain and temperature drop present the most controversial elements. Simultaneous equipment failure across multiple devices would require significant interference. Could moisture intrusion cause cascading shutdown? Possibly. Could voltage irregularities create mass drain? Rare, but not impossible. The sudden cold is harder to assess. Visible breath does not necessarily indicate a 30-degree drop. Humidity and camera exposure influence perception. Thermal imaging data would be necessary to confirm. Some commentators declare the phenomena impossible. Physicists push back. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And this footage, raw and chaotic, leaves gaps. Public statements attributed to investigators in this dramatized account reflect internal conflict. "I'm a scientist," one says. "I believe in evidence. I saw something I can't explain." That distinction matters. Not supernatural, not demonic, just unexplained. Paranormal researchers frame the encounter as a negative entity manifestation. They cite historical accounts of malevolent presences in the forest. They interpret physical interaction as rare but documented in occult literature. Skeptics remain unconvinced. If it's fake, one analyst says, it's the most convincing fabrication we've seen, and that may be the real reason this story won't die. Not because it proves something, but because it refuses to resolve. The forest's legend is built on ambiguity. The twisted trees, the barren clearing where nothing grows, compasses spinning. Generations of caution pass through families. Whether environmental anomaly, psychological contagion, misinterpretation of natural phenomena, or something not yet understood. Hoia Baciu remains one of the most debated locations in Europe. And that's the tension your documentary should lean into, not certainty, not declaration, but the space between explanation and fear. When the footage first arrived in the editing bay, the executive producer watched it alone. No music, no narration. Just 17 minutes of escalating chaos. In this dramatized reconstruction, he immediately understood what he was looking at. "This is important," he reportedly said internally. "It may be the most compelling material we've captured in years." To him, it wasn't just another episode. It was a breakthrough. Raw, uncomfortable, historic. He believed it should air. Inside the network meeting, the divide became clear. On one side, the argument for transparency. On the other, the calculus of risk. He pushes. "This is why we do this work." Executives counter. "This is a liability nightmare," he insists. "The public deserves to see it." The response is colder. "We have obligations beyond storytelling." It isn't about belief versus disbelief. It's about exposure. Legal, financial, reputational. The disagreement is fundamental. It cannot be softened through edits or disclaimers. The footage is either shown as it is, or not shown at all. In this narrative, the decision is made to shelve it. For months, the executive wrestles with the outcome. He signed contracts. He agreed to confidentiality. His career has been built on trust and credibility. But he also built that career on the idea of honest exploration. If something extraordinary was captured, does the audience not deserve to judge for themselves? Corporate interest versus public transparency? Which matters more? The turning point in this reconstruction isn't ratings. It's the human cost. The investigators went through genuine fear. Trauma was documented. And now the experience would disappear into an archive. What does it mean if an event occurs and is erased? Eventually, the footage surfaces online. Unedited, anonymous. And speculation begins. Was it an act of conscience? A breach of contract? A calculated risk? Public statements attributed in the dramatized account echo defiance. "I believe in transparency." Sometimes the truth is uncomfortable. Not a confession, not an admission, but a posture. If a network executive were to leak proprietary footage, the consequences would be severe. Lawsuits, financial penalties, suspension of projects, review of all future productions, trust permanently altered. Within the narrative, future seasons hang in uncertainty. Productions pause. Oversight intensifies. Careers balance on edge. But the deeper tension remains philosophical. If evidence challenges existing frameworks, who decides whether the public can see it? A corporation? A producer? The audience? That's the core of your documentary, not whether the leak happened, but the ethical dilemma. Truth versus obligation. Transparency versus contract. Discovery versus control. Contracts signed. NDAs binding. Years of credibility built carefully, deliberately. And yet, in this reconstruction, he reaches a conclusion that overrides self-preservation. Some things are bigger than career. If the footage truly captured something extraordinary, something potentially dangerous, then withholding it feels wrong. Not commercially wrong, morally wrong. People deserve to know, he tells himself. Principle over profit. Transparency over security. When the footage surfaces, the reaction fractures along predictable lines. Within the paranormal community, support is immediate and intense. Commentators praise the decision as courageous. Online discussions frame it as resistance against corporate suppression. A petition circulates urging the network not to retaliate. Thousands sign. Skeptics remain cautious. They warn against romanticizing contract violations or mistaking emotional conviction for proof. Meanwhile, the two field investigators, in this dramatized account, publicly acknowledge the emotional toll of that night. They don't frame it as heroism. They frame it as impact. "That night changed me," one says quietly. "Some places should be left alone." The network response remains measured and corporate. Projects are paused pending review. Legal counsel evaluates options. No dramatic firings. No public escalation. Just tension. Behind the scenes, the question becomes existential. If proprietary footage is released without authorization, what precedent does that set? And on the other side, if potentially significant evidence is buried for liability reasons, what precedent does that set? The debate expands beyond paranormal circles. Media ethicists weigh in. Law professors discuss NDAs versus whistleblower protections. Universities, intrigued by the technical anomalies shown in the footage, analyze it academically. Not to prove the supernatural, but to dissect perception, stress response, environmental interference, and mass psychology. Even the location itself, Hoia Baciu Forest, regains global attention. Tourism increases. Authorities monitor access more carefully. The mythology deepens. In your narrative's final arc, the executive producer begins developing an independent project, crowdfunded, outside network control. Not as rebellion, but as autonomy. The core question becomes larger than one show. Who owns the truth? A network that finances production? A producer who witnesses the event? Or the public that consumes it? The footage, whether extraordinary evidence or elaborate misinterpretation, transforms the conversation, not because it proves something conclusively, but because it exposes the tension between transparency and liability, curiosity and caution, belief and skepticism, and perhaps the most unsettling line of all remains. If what we saw was real, then it doesn't matter whether it cost me everything.